JohnnyCars.com.
Come on, you can do better than that. Javier's taunts kept on coming from the pitcher's mound, a smug grin on the old baseball player's face. Lewis was at home plate on the makeshift baseball pitch. He had Javi's metal bat in his hands. After the grueling 3 weeks of training, Javi suggested a little rest would do some good. Clem and Gabe sat on the stands watching the men practice. Having just missed 3 swings in a row, Lewis rolled his eyes and he gripped the handle of his bat firmly, his knuckles going white from the pressure. Raising it above his hand, he nodded at Javier. "I'll get it this time," he assured the man. Javier nodded and threw back his arm, ready to pitch. Before the ball could fly through into the air, a blinding sharp pain shot up Clem's abdomen. Lodging herself over by her pelvis, she doubled over in pain, clutching her stomach. She barely heard the distinctive metallic sound when Lewis finally hit the ball and flew it over Javier's head. A hand gripped onto her shoulder. "Hey, are you okay, Clem?" Gabe asked in concern in his voice. Clementine managed to compose herself, straightening her back and breathed deeply. She nodded and looked at Gabe, who was frowning, but with the best smile she could muster, she said, "Yeah, I think I may have caught a bug or something." "You should have go get that checked out by Eleanor," he suggested, eyeing her up and down. "I'm fine, Gabe," she assured him. Rolling her eyes, her stomach betrayed those words as another pain made her flinch. "He's right, Clem," Lewis's voice came from behind them. He was leaning against the stands. Javi's bat had been forgotten by the plate. "You might be getting sick," he said, winking at her conspicuously. She pursed her lips and agreed, but none of the less. It wouldn't do any good to get sick with the baby on the way. Dismissing Gabe's hand, he tried to help her up. Clementine left the 3 men at the standards and started walking down the street. Her hurried pace drew a few heads in a direction. Their presence had been accepted by practically everyone, some of them even offering a small welcome present. Apparently any friends of Javier's was a friend of theirs. She spotted a big white tent up ahead with a cross looming over for the crowded street. She got to the door and she spotted the woman with deep gray eyes staring at her from behind the column. When they locked eyes, the woman sprinted off down the alleyway at full speed. "That's weird," Clem muttered to herself. She then entered the tent, and a dozen of beds surrounded her at the one side. As she walked, she was startled by a pained moan coming from the occupied bed on her left. A bearded man was lying on it, his glasses askew, and his hand, and he was clutching a pulsing bite mark on his right calf. Take it off! Take it off!" he kept screaming, his eyes watering. "At this point, it's too late, Mark," the doctor beside him said, closing his eyes. "Please, you have to try," the man pleaded. Clementine didn't hear the rest of the conversation as she spotted Eleanor standing beside an empty bed that went to have her. The older woman lifted up her head and did some paperwork and smiled at Clem. "Hey there," she said, putting down the clipboard. "What brings you by?" Hesitant, Clementine shuffled to her feet, and she debated whatever she should tell her about her condition. "I think I might have caught the stomach bug," she lied. Nodding, the doctor patted the bed beside her and adjusted her coat. She rummaged through the plastic box of containers of supplies and took out several medical objects. Clementine sat down, fidgeting with her fingers. Around them, doctors and patients alike roamed the aisle. She had heard soft sobs coming from the bed from the bitten man, and her eyes wandered away from them. She had spotted some gray-eyed woman from behind before by a nearby nurse. Her wavy black hair flowed down into her shoulders, its tips caressing them and her patterned flannel shirt. Clem was brought back from the thoughts by Eleanor asking her to open her mouth. She did as the doctor told her, and Eleanor gently placed a wooden stick on her tongue, examining both inside of her mouth. Nothing out of the ordinary," she muttered, squinting. "Aside from poorly kept teeth," she said. "Who has time to brush their teeth these days?" Clem asked, hysterically shrugging. "Good point," conceded Eleanor. She placed a wooden stick on the tray, lifting Clem's shirt from the back and grabbing a stethoscope from her neck. "This might be cold." Sure enough, the metal surface made contact with Clementine's skin. A chill went up her spine. She breathed in and out deeply at Eleanor's command. The older woman walked around the bed and stood right in front of her, repeating the procedure on her chest. She placed a soft hand on Clementine's forehead, lifting a new stray of hairs that flowed from under the woman's hat. "How long have you been feeling this way?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "A couple of days," Clem assured her, nodding. "It's probably just a reaction to food I had," she speculated. "Could be," Eleanor conceded, raising an eyebrow at her. "Well, you don't have a fever as far as I could tell. Take it easy for a couple days, and come back if you're still feeling under the weather by then." "Thanks, Eleanor," Clementine said as she standing up, pulling down her shirt. "No problem," the woman smiled at Clem. "So how are you and your husband adjusting to life at Richmond?" she asked. "We're doing just fine," Clem shrugged. "Gabe's been teaching Louis how to shoot, actually." "Yeah, so I've heard from Javier. So how did you guys met?" Clementine leaned against the bed and crossed her arms, looking down. "AJ and I were in a car crash 5 years ago, and his group saved us. We started dating not long after that." "Love at first sight?" Eleanor inquired, grinning. "Well, you could say that," conceded Clem. "We decided to get married about 2 months ago. It was an very improvs thing, really." Nodding, Eleanor finished jotting down notes on her clipboard. She reminded Clementine of the precautions that she ought to want to take, and excused herself to go check on another patient. The pregnant woman took her leave. She realized that the bitten man hadn't been transported out of the tent at that one point during her checkup. As she exited out of the tent, she started walking down towards the batting cages again. She barely made it 3 steps before her head had started spinning. However, leaning against the pole, she closed her eyes and unsuccessfully willed the dizziness to go away. When it eventually did, Clementine swayed on the spot. The sun was about to set on the horizon, casting a deep orange hue on the surfacing of the buildings. Most of the people outside were lazily leaning on sidewalks and talking amongst themselves. The world had kept her spinning, and she lost her footing. Clem almost collapsed, but she was caught by a pair of strong arms. "Whoa there, you fainted right straight into my arms." Louis's voice broke through her thoughts. His toothy grin flashed above her. "You know, if you wanted my attention, you shouldn't have to go so at such an extremes," he added cheekily. Clementine, who rubbed her eyes, pulled away from him, a sly grin on her face. "Who says I was trying to get your attention?" she teased, pretending to look anywhere but him. Louis crossed his arms and chuckled. "Well played, Everett. I just was looking at you, actually." "You were? Javier told me that about the St. Patrick's Day party in a couple days from now," he told her, shaking her head. "I wanted you to know if you would like to go to it. It would be a good place to meet some of our neighbors from the next 7 months. The couple started walking down the direction of the admin building. "They're throwing parties?" she asked incredulously. "Apparently they do, for a couple of years just to keep the morale high and the tensions low," he explained with a shrug. When they get to the building, they open the door and he opened the door for her, and then Louis walked in after her. They made their way to the other room, absently talking about Louis's practice with Javier. As Clementine walked in, she spotted AJ at the desk. He was working on a drawing, the pencil box Javier gave for him to open beside him. Clem cleared her throat, and the boy turned around, the smile on his face, and he ran up to her, wrapping his arms around her tight embrace. Clementine returned the gesture. "Careful there, buddy," Louis warned, closing the door behind him. "You gotta be careful not to squeeze Louis Jr. here." "For the last time, we're not calling him our baby Louis Jr., Clem explained. "Well, that's an idea," said Louis, rolling his eyes. He walked down towards the wardrobe, shuffling it out of his coat and stacking it neatly over a pile of clothes. Clem and AJ took a seat on the master bed, broken springs creaking under their weight. The dim sunlight seeped through the boarded-up windows and cast odd shadows on them, and Clem fumbled in a drawer for candles. Once they were all set up, Louis approached Clementine and planted a kiss on her forehead. "I've got a lookout duty with Gabe tonight," he informed them. Clem straightened up and kissed him on the lips, her hand playing with the dreads on the back of his head. They broke apart as AJ started making gagging noises. "Gross!" he muttered, making the couple laugh. "I'll see you tomorrow, little dude," Louis beamed. "They have got the boy," and as he gave the boy a high five. "And look at this leave on him," closing the door behind them. Clementine turned to her charge and smiled smile. We should be getting to bed soon, kiddo. But I'm not tired, he argued, frowning. Still, you haven't slept in these past days. She noted, standing up. She extended her hand to him, and he reluctantly took it. I'll stay with you until you fall asleep. How's that? All right, he said. Together they entered the adjoining room, where AJ had been staying there for almost a month. It was much smaller than Clem and Lewis's room, with the two twin beds standing on one side, and on the other a wardrobe held a number of small garments. Javi had been able to put them in there most for the kid, most of them half moth-eaten. AJ lit 3 candles on his makeshift nightstand and climbed into bed. His legs creaked as he got into a comfortable position. Clem sat beside him, her hands on her lap and a smile on her face. At her request, the boy closed his eyes and laid his head back onto the stained pillow. Sweet dreams, Clem whispered, kissing AJ's forehead. She sat on the bed for a while as she promised AJ, thinking about the events of the day. The smallest episode with Gabe and at the stand almost blew her cover. She realized at that point, the man would start wondering why she had not been doing as many supplies runs as her husband, or they had returned to Richmond in the first place. Then there was a mysterious woman who had been staring at her outside the infirmary. What was her deal? Clem thought. She had been staring at her maybe because she was curious about the newcomer, or was it something else? Her train of thought had been broken by a soft voice from her left said, Hey, Clem. Yes, kiddo, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. When is the baby coming? He inquired. His eyes were still closed, but a small smile had formed on his lips. Clem chuckled softly. It's going to be another 7 months, she informed him. You're going to have to be patient. I could be patient, he assured her, nodding. He was silent for a moment before opening his mouth again. What do you think it's going to be? She shot about his question for a moment. The more she thought about it, the more Lewis's wish of a daughter made sense. Well, what would you like it to be? She asked him. He mumbled, clearing, thinking hard. I think I want it to be a boy. Is that so? Yeah, then he could play with me and Lewis, he exclaimed happily. A girl could do that too, you know, she noted, raising an eyebrow. She can? Wondered AJ, looking up at her. When she nodded, he then said, Oh, then I don't mind either. Clem smiled as the boy laid back on the pillow and closed his eyes, sighing deeply. I'll be the best big brother, whispered AJ, just like you were for me. After that, Clem heard nothing more but then the even breathing of the small boy. 5 days later, Clementine found herself on the steps on the rather large mansion in the middle, across from Richmond. Lewis stood by her side, wearing his signature grin and his trusty trench coat. After some consideration, she had agreed to come to the St. Patrick's Day party with him, and she was already regretting that decision. The double doors were extremely ornate, small brass handles adorning them. Small green banners had been hung from the ancient-looking lampposts. The doors had been opened up to a large ballroom, and a small number of tables were scattered around the room, with appetizers and drinks for the guests. The walls were pasty beige color, framed pictures covering up most of the surface. A broken chandelier hung from the ceiling, small plastic leprechauns hanging from it. A big speaker blasted Irish music across the room. All people of all ages danced to the rhythm in the drunken Superior. Clem spotted Gabriel on the dance floor, joined by a group of people that she didn't recognize. He seemed to be having a good time, so she and Lewis were swerved right into one of the group, which in search of appetizers. On wooden tables there was an assortment of chips and dips. It's almost like the world hasn't gone downhill, Lewis commented on Clem's ear, making her chuckle. She helped herself to a chip and mixed it with some dipping sauce. As the chip touched her mouth, her eyes opened wide. This is amazing! Enjoying the party? Javier's voice boomed from behind him, a giddy smile on his lips. Glad you came. You can come. He extended the beer bottle to Lewis. Thanks for inviting us, Lewis said when he's taking the bottle and nodding. He took a sip and scrunched up his nose as the liquid touched his throat. Yeah, it's got a bit of a kick, Avi warned, clapping Lewis on the shoulder. He turned to Clementine. Are you still up for that supply run with Gabe tomorrow? He inquired. Yeah, assured Clem. I'll be there. Awesome, he exclaimed, nodding to them, and then taking up his leave. The couple stayed on the sidelines, absently chatting about week's events and sparing glances for Javier and Gabe, both of them who seemed to be more tipsy. About a half an hour later, Louis excused himself to go to the bathroom, claiming he had one too many beers. Clem chuckled and kissed him on the cheek and leaned against one of the walls to wait for him. She examined the room, smiling as the atmosphere of joy and relaxation settled on her. It really seemed that the apocalypse had been skipped this place, she thought. She still remembered the time the new frontier was at its peak, and the living conditions were much bleaker. This is much better, she decided. A tap on the shoulder made her turn, and she turned to that she was faced with none other than Eleanor. "Hey there," she greeted, offering Eleanor a small smile. "Feeling any better?" the woman asked as the way of introduction. "Much better," Clementine assured her. "Thanks for the advice the other day." "No problem, it's my job after all," said Eleanor, shrugging. She extended her hand to Clementine with a beer bottle in it. "Care for a drink?" Hesitantly, Clementine took it and looked at the label. It read Budweiser, and she lifted the bottle, but as soon as the liquid touched her lips, her eyes widened and she spat it out. Cleaning her mouth with her sleeve, she set the bottle on the table beside her. She heard Eleanor snap her fingers on the left. "I knew it," the woman said. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" she inquired. Taken back by the question, Clem blinked twice. "How did you know that?" "When you came around the other day, I had my suspicions. You had all the symptoms, but you were positive it was a bug," explained Eleanor. "But I wasn't exactly sure, and I didn't want to just ask." So you tried drinking me a beer? Have you drink a beer instead?" Clem shot back, raising an eyebrow. "Not my best plan, I admit," said the other woman, "but you should really tell the doctor the truth next time." Now Fletcher Clementine played with the hem on her shirt. "I'm sorry, we are just not ready to tell people." "I understand. Will you please not tell the rest?" Clem pleaded. "Javi already knows about it, of course, but no one else." Eleanor eyed Clementine up and down, and her arms crossed. Eventually she smiled. "Of course, I promise." "You do?" "Yeah," said Eleanor, a smile on her face. Doctor-patient confidently.
Why, hello there, my little pretties. It's me, the Shadow Lioness. I hope you all enjoy my video of creepypasta. So, without further ado, if you liked the video, please leave a like. And if you want to survive my cave of terror, please hit the subscribe button down below. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Donate to my Patreon when you can. And the only way you're going to survive me in the cave is you're going to have to sub to me and press the bell for notifications so you'll get to know when I upload. Well, without further ado, my little pretties, I'll see you in the next video.